Hi everyone, welcome to the Optimised Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Sargent, and today I'm joined by the amazing Emma Price, owner of Supafoot Cheltenham, but also runs our mastermind group and is a coach to practice owners. Today we're going to be talking about the phase of how Emma transitioned from a job into a business. And there are a couple of pieces in that timeline, like the mechanics of how she was truly able to finally step away from her practice and allow it to run for itself. So welcome, Emma. Now take us back to, obviously you started sole practitioner by yourself, as a lot of people do. What was the first step you took towards ultimately having a business that works without you?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So the first step definitely was moving into bigger premises. So I solo practitioner, gained a couple of team members, and then realized I was needing more space. So I moved into a 3-room practice and then realized, well, obviously I now need to fill this. Started gaining team members, advertising, naturally people were inquiring, and started this glorious kind of collection of people, and wasn't really sure where to go next. So obviously I joined the Hive. That was the first best thing I did in 2021. And from there started to learn more and more about how to run my business and the work that is required to grow a successful practice, you know, to how actually to have a business rather than just a job. So fast forward a couple of years, did the hard work and realized that my plate was filling up with administrative stuff and measuring my metrics, and then starting to think about my meetings and how often I was having to do those. And suddenly I couldn't treat patients and keep my brain on the business side of things. So I knew something had to give. And then I have always had a wonderful administrative lady called Kaylee. Any of the members will know. And we had a really honest conversation in a meeting once. And she told me that actually she didn't love the front of house work anymore. And was there an opportunity for her to be doing more back office kind of work? I thought, all right, okay. This is a bit of a, what do I want to say, like a message from the universe. Okay, so what can I give her from my little list of things that I'm doing? Very quickly, things started to sort of snowball from there. So the first thing I did, I started to collect people in answer to your question. And, you know, these people need managing. So I needed to started to find people, little slots in my business. Yeah, the obvious choices started to make themselves apparent.
So from the time of you treating patients, working with patients 5 days a week, did you then reduce to 4, 3, 2? What was that transition?
I made a very quick decision. I'm not going to lie. I went from 5 days a week to sort of 2 days a week quite quickly.
By hiring one full-timer?
Yeah, hired one full-timer, slowly transitioned. I decided I was going to pass them my patients, and over about 8 weeks, worked solely with that practitioner and basically said, this is your new podiatrist. Aren't they wonderful? They're going to be treating you from now on. I did sit in with them a lot. So it wasn't can't snap your fingers and turn off the taps. But what I wanted to do was let my patients know that they were important to me and they were important to the business, and that this is a nice way, a gentle way, a respectful way of passing those patients over. So this is your new podiatrist. They're going to be treating you from now on. I think you'll find they're probably better than I am, that kind of stuff. And, you know, to the point where I would let them actually do the treating that day and say, oh, do you know, I've just got to pop out for a second. I'd leave them to it and let them have a chat, crack on, you know, they can do the treatment. And then I'd come in at the end and, oh, you don't really need me anymore. You know, sort of almost make myself redundant in that situation. And then I'd say, great, you know, book in with so-and-so next time. Sometimes I see these people in the corridor and they don't even know who I am. And there's me thinking I'm the center of their world. You know, I'm this important person in their lives. And I think that's a big mistake that we all make as business owners and as healthcare professionals. You know, we think that these patients think we're the most wonderful thing in the world and they care deeply about us. And the truth is they want to get their feet done. They want a good service. So as soon as you offer them that with another person, yeah, they might like you. It actually was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I was a little bit hurt they didn't recognize me because I remember you. But hey, that's a great thing, right? That they don't remember who I am.
And then, so you've got a full time and now you're treating 2 days a week. Was there a temptation to, we're now growing, I should take more work on, or or did you hire again? What was that next step then?
Funnily enough, I had a conversation very similar to this week with a client, and the temptation was there, oh, we've got a bit of white space, and should I dive back in and rescue this situation? But I held strong. But yeah, the temptation was there. So as soon as everybody was full, then I was like, right, we've got to hire again. We've got to do it again. We go again. So I hired another practitioner and passed off the rest of those patients. And in the meantime, the other 3 days, I was starting to mentor, manage, teach my new back office sort of administrator, all the bits I was doing there. So in a similar way that I passed my patients over, I passed some of my duties over. Like, this is how I do a stock take. This is how I do this. Trying to, this is a common thing, like empty my brain, because this whole business is in my head. How am I going to systemize this? So I emptied my brain onto poor Kaylee, and now she's flying with it. And we've built lots of systems around this. But those 3 days, passing over administrative stuff, and then hired and weaned the other 2 days of patients away as well.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about that process of it being about you and everything being in your head to actually turning it into a systemized business that now you can spend a lot of time away. You don't have to go every day at all, and it still runs. So what tech did you have to introduce? What people did you have to introduce? What was that transition?
From a tech perspective, that, now there's loads of different options. Back, 3 years ago, with, AI and all this sort of stuff wasn't there. So we actually, and I would still advocate for this method, just had a really organized Google Drive and spreadsheets. So sort of we had a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and I just sort of detailed out what I would be doing right now, what the list of things that I find are important and need to be done on a Monday, Tuesday, etc., etc. And then we started to unpick each one and ruthlessly rip it to pieces and then try and reorganize it, because it's easy for me to, like I say, it's in my head. I can just whiz through that cupboard because I know what to look for. I know what the colours of all the different dressings are. Oh, if it's orange, it's got to be this one or whatever. But Kaylee's not a practitioner, teaching somebody that you have to go right back to basics and actually go, the way I'm doing this is really stupid. Why don't we rethink this? So actually, it's really refreshing. And coming at it from a non-clinician's perspective, she was like, well, why is it like that? And I was like, that's because that's the way I've always done it. So ruthless ripping apart of the systems, and just to start with, just write it all down in a spreadsheet, almost like in Dan Martell's book, he talks about just writing a diary of what you do every 20 minutes for 2 weeks. And actually that process is super powerful. Just like, what would I be doing now? What would I be doing now? Yeah. So Google Sheets, spreadsheets like that. We now have a really nice Trello board with sort of daily activities on, which works really well for us. And of course, there are multiple AI systems now that you can run these systems through. But to be honest, it was just really organized spreadsheets. It was the best place to start. It was free. You don't have to start investing loads of cash in these things. You just have to sit down and be systematic.
And so then tell us about how many team members you went through and where you're at now, and how that has shifted your role.
Initially, when I moved into this 3-room practice, we started with 3 of us, then we quite quickly got to 5, 6 after a year or so. The more practitioners you add, the more administrators you need, which I found. So I sort of almost alternated, sort of practitioner, and then I need another part-time admin to support that role. Cut forward to today, we've got, including me, 10 of us. So I've got 9. I've got 5 pods, 4 administrators. 1 is a full-time practice manager, and I've got 3 people doing a job share on the front desk.
So that's 2, the equivalent of 2 full-time admin.
Yeah.
Plus yourself, not that you're admin, but you're non-revenue generating now.
Yeah.
And 5, the equivalent of 5 full-timers, isn't it? And
no, that's 4.5.
4.5 full-timers. Okay, so 2 to 4.5. Great ratio there. And you moved into a 6-room practice.
Yes.
What skills did you have to learn, and because now you're running a business versus treating patients, they're night and day different. What did you learn? What have you had to do? What does it look like for you now?
I had to completely reset. I had to learn how to be a completely different person in my business. The skills are very transferable from being a healthcare practitioner and a podiatrist over to mentoring and coaching your team, but you have to care, and you have to be invested in this thing. But the biggest lesson is to not be hands-on. And I mean that in every sense. As a healthcare practitioner, you want to fix stuff, and actually coming away from that and letting somebody else do it was really, really hard. And you had to be like, yeah, they've got this, it's fine, you'll be fine. And it's the same. So when I see a problem in the business, be it a systems error or a complaint or whatever it is, it's so easy for me, just very naturally, just to jump in and rescue and go, well, I've seen this before, this is how I fixed it. But that, I must, and I'm learning to back right off and see what happens. Let's just sit in this space for a minute and see, my team have got this. By jumping in immediately and fixing things, you're not letting them learn, and you're showing them that they, potentially you don't trust them. So, one of the first things I had to learn how to do is to take a breath, zoom out, and let them come up with a solution first. That's the first sort of skill set that I really had to learn.
Coach leadership, yeah. Stepping off the field, you can't be a manager player, right? It's very no Premiership football team has a manager player anymore. Back in the 60s maybe that was a thing, but you mustn't. You're not a player. You need to stand on the sidelines and trust your team to score the goals. Nice. And so when was that moment for you? When did you realize that the highest and best use of your time was spent off the pitch, and that you had to stop being the one scoring the goals? Was it gradual, or was it?
It was gradual. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that, I flicked a switch and I was no longer this practitioner. But I think moving into the 6-room practice was an amazing opportunity for me to really transition. Everything transitioned in that move, and suddenly I don't have a room. Like, this is your room, this is your room. They do swap a bit, but this is not my clinic. This is the Supafoot, Whereas before, I had always been working in that room, and that was my desk, and that was where I had my stuff. But very much like, this is the team room. These are your clinic rooms, and I'm just in and out, floating around. So I think it was a nice, easy transition, because we moved premises, and that was a really good line in the sand. So that was the end of 25. So mid 25 really, because I had to plan the transition. I had to move the building, and there was a lot of work that went into that. I was constantly away with the planners, constantly, warehouses and B&Q and whatnot. So I was sort of managing that process, which meant I had to be away from the clinic, and that was a great opportunity as well for the team to be like, "Where's Emma? She's not here, but we're all good." It was a nice test.
Yeah, nice. They got used to you not being there. And then you took yourself off the practice management software, from what I remember, because the universe delivered you something nice, which was they tried to charge you, you'd have had to upgrade your subscription to have the extra person. You went, actually, I think I'll just take myself off completely.
Yeah, that was another step. Yeah, just closing my diary. It's super useful. I'm just not in there.
Yeah. And so now you're off the pitch, and your best use of your time is working with your team. What does that look like? How often do you speak to them? What meetings do you run? Like, how do you train your team and allow them to score the goals?
I do all of the one-to-ones for the clinical team. I transitioned over the one-to-ones for my practice manager to work with the admin team. I still sit in biannual reviews, the 6 monthly ones with the admin team, but she actually put her through an apprenticeship, and she needed to take leadership of a team to pass that apprenticeship, and it worked beautifully. So I was like, great. So I've sort of managed to transition that over. So I do the one-to-ones every month with the clinical team, and I we have leadership teams. So my senior clinician, my practice manager, and myself sit down once a month. We have a team meeting every month, but I don't run those. I am present for most of them, but I am now very much letting the practice manager or the senior clinician run those. I just contribute, if at all. We have CPD days 4 times a year, and we have practitioner meetings once a week, and I try and come to most of those. So I'm definitely, even with the meetings, I'm much less involved, but maintain some sort of contact with them. So I do try and come in because our practitioner meetings are always just before lunch, which is always it's good because if they run over, they turn into a nice conversation and everyone has their lunch, and it's a good thing. So I try and be present for the practitioner meetings and then have lunch with the team at least once a week, and then I'm in 2 or 3 afternoons a week. But now they're kind of like, it's normal that I'm not there.
Nice. From a cultural perspective as well, the other team stuff, do you do quarterlies or annuals on top of those? What do you?
Yeah, well, we have four sort of days a year where we go off site, and we have what we're going to do one big one. We've never done like a big sort of away day, as in an overnight. So we're going to add that in. That's a new thing. We're going to do that's going to be in the summer, and in fact in 2 days' time, on Friday, we've got our first annual away day of the year. We're doing some pottery, squash cups or something. It's like, yeah, anyway. So we're going to be doing some pottery and some team building stuff on Friday, and we're going to do that 4 times a year. So we do break out for a couple of days at a time every quarter.
What do you think, having worked with other practice owners now as well, and I'll happily share the bits that I've picked up along the way, but what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to go from this journey of sole practitioner to business, which is a long journey? It's a transition, and then you get off the tools, and then you pass over the admin and all that. What have you noticed? I'll tell you one of the things that I'd noticed, so we can make it a bit more of a chat about this stuff, because we work with a lot of clients as well. Is they hire a practice manager too early, which means they're trying to outsource the running of their business too early. I've seen people where they're full-time practitioner and they're busy themselves, and they go, my next hire is a practice manager, because they go, I don't have the time to run the business. So they try and outsource that bit, but that's the bit that you shouldn't outsource. So I often feel like the game should be try and wait as late as possible to hire a practice manager, or even better, like you've done and Troy's done, is to find a highly competent admin, because admin work, reception work is the best training to become a practice manager. And then that competent person, when the business is big enough and can afford it, can then step into practice management role. That's one of the things I noticed. What about you?
I completely agree. You know, we're hearing that more and more. I brought an ops manager in, or a general manager, or a practice manager, or whatever you want to call it. And I agree. I think, you know, I'm not saying the way I did it is right, but it worked. So transitioning from 5 days to 3 days as a practitioner freed up the time for me to think about the systems I need to implement in my business. I didn't need to hire a full-time practice manager at the point where I came off the tools, you know, because then I could do the administrative work that I needed to do to keep myself sane and not work 80-hour week. So as soon as I gave myself that space and time, I could then think about the business. I then wanted to come off the tools even more, because I realized that running a practice is, well, we all know that, but it is a full-time job as well as being a practitioner. So suddenly 3 days a week almost wasn't enough, because then I took another practitioner on, which drew my attention away again. So there was then an obvious gap, but I hadn't done that until I think I was 4 practitioners in, or 3.5 practitioners in. And then I realized, actually looking after those guys, I now need some help, the day-to-day stuff. So it was much more of a sort of a step-by-step, gradual phasing in of a practice manager, where almost, you know, a part-time role became a full-time role. So Kaylee was working part-time on reception and then wanted full-time work. So I was like, well, that's great. So you can do a bit of phones and a bit of back office, and then love the back office. Great. Well, I can hire someone to do your part-time phone role, and you can take full-time here. And that took a year or so. I wouldn't have been able to justify with my margins having admin and reception, having practice manager and reception. It just, the size we were and the needs that we had, I could cover most of the practice manager stuff. It's only when I think you get to a certain critical mass that the practitioner and the one-to-ones and the mentoring of the team and the producer and the guardian of the culture, it becomes a job in itself, and then you need someone else. So yeah, it's like I don't know, I'd say probably 4 to 5, maybe 4 practitioners.
Yeah, full time.
Yeah,
800
3.
patients a month.
Yeah, then you start to need the critical mass is it sort of tips to the point where you actually need a practice manager. I think that's fair. I think that's fair in my experience.
And what other mistakes do you notice people make along the way, do you think?
Being in the friend zone. I think that's just speaking to my problems, but yeah, I think becoming, what am I trying to say? Not a practice owner, because I am a practice owner, but becoming more of a management layer. I think the relationships you have with your team, I think that needs to be guarded safely. And I think there's nothing wrong with being friendly. Of course there isn't, but I actually think there needs to be a level of hierarchy on some level, keeping your team at a slight distance to make objective and good decisions, and being able to have difficult conversations with them, rather than, because I was once part of the gang. I was there. They were my practitioner buddies, and we would all, talk at lunchtime. And I never saw myself as their boss or their manager. And I think that personality shift needs to happen. It's just a mindset thing that is quite hard to manage, and it needs to be managed well and carefully. I think staying in that over familiar or over friendly zone is something I see a bit that needs managing.
It's a really good point. I remember at an event not that long ago, we sort of talked about this a little, which was, I'd seen a training around this, talks about the All Blacks rugby team, but it's also another guru who had said, your team is not your family. And there's that old school thing, oh, we're family here, we're family. No, they're not your family. And if you treat them like family, as lovely as that sounds, you don't create a high performing team. The All Blacks or the England rugby team might get on like house on fire, but they're not family, right? Actually, they are a high performing unit where every person is expected to live up to their standards, and it's, and so on and so forth. Whereas if you get this sort of overly friendly environment, seems like the nice and right thing to do, but it backfires very, very fast. Oh, don't worry, Emma will let you go early on Thursday. And then it's okay. Oh, can I just have Tuesday morning because I need to take my dog to the vet? And it's all those little things that then creep, and you go, oh, yeah, the friend thing doesn't build a high performing culture, and it's not good for the team either.
And it's not to say there isn't mutual respect, kindness, consideration, care, all of those things are absolutely pivotal to having a clean culture. But I also think so is honesty and the ability to have a difficult conversation with somebody when you don't have that clean cut, that makes your job a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Really so that's one thing I have experienced. I think I'm pretty good at it now, but hey, no one's perfect. And I think that would be my advice. If I was doing it again, I would probably, slightly distance.
And if you don't mind me saying or sharing, because I know your journey a bit, like that goes against your nature, meaning that you are incredibly kind and friendly. That's your default. So actually, to build a high performing team, you've had to learn the skill of detachment, loving detachment, where you still really care for these people, but you keep enough distant that you're able to hold them to a good stand and enable them to do really, really good work. And it's ultimately a better dynamic.
I mean, I remember us doing a training session, and the one thing I identified as my greatest asset and biggest flaw is my kindness and consideration of others. It's a wonderful thing, but it's not always a good thing. So, but that's okay. That's something for us all to work on.
Final thought, comment around your journey. What's one piece of advice you would give to help people on this transition from job to business?
I would urge people to consider the team they're pulling together really, really carefully and sit in it for a period of time before changing. Current climate, we're very quick to change things. Sit with your team, and understand what it is it really needs. Think about what you think it needs, and then pause on it. I think quick snap decisions when it comes to team and business are never a great thing.
I would say you shifted your thought from like, rather than building a business, build a team. And that's quite an and that's what you've been really good at, is actually we think we're actually building a business, but we're actually not building a business. What we're really building is a team, because the team is the business. And so I think that sort of selection thing of like thinking of it of being like a football manager as well. You go, right, I've got to put my squad together. Right. And that's going to take a bit of time, but I need the right player in the right position. And I also need to be off the pitch, and my highest and best use of time is to then work with each of those individuals, help them play better as a team, but help them individually get better as well. And
watch them, orient them, make a change, watch what happens. I think that's the key, I think, to working with it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, there we go. That's all for this episode of the Optimised Practice Podcast. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey, Emma. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe so that you don't miss any other episodes, and don't forget to follow us. And if you need help building your practice, please reach out to us at the Hive so that we can help show you how to build a profitable, stable and highly respected practice that can ultimately work without your daily input, just like Emma. See you in the next episode.